Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon session about environmental diplomacy in conflict situations. My name is Tariq Abu Hamid. I'm the Executive Director of the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies. I would like to start by thanking the Ministry of Regional Cooperation for inviting us to talk about the work that we do at the Arava Institute in the topic of environmental diplomacy, the use of science, environment, research as a diplomacy tool to connect between people. We will have two consecutive panels, one after the other, one by the Arava Institute and the second one by Tel Aviv University. And we will do the concluding remarks after the second panel. So please stay with us till 2:30. There will be two sessions, one after the other. And it's my great pleasure to invite Ms. Muna Masalha to give a speech for you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It is a great honor and a pleasure to be here among you today and to discuss this important topic with you. On behalf of the Ministry of Regional Cooperation, I thank you all for your important efforts concerning climate change. The Arava Institute, headed by Dr. Tariq Abu Hamid, and our partners from the regional states, and from the United Kingdom. So, today, I would like to address one issue of leadership that guides the coping with the climate crisis. As John Maxwell says, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. We at the Ministry of Regional Cooperation strive diligently for building and encouraging cooperation relations with neighboring states on common grounds, one of the most important of which is the climate change challenges. The existence of guiding leadership among governmental decision makers, the public and the municipal sectors, as well as in the civil society, a leadership that acknowledges the mere fact of the severe crisis and the need to take immediate steps for coping with its dangers has been the main drive for performing actions out in this field. Climate change is a cross-border crisis, not just another future event rolling on from one generation to the other, but an ongoing reality that endangers human existence. It is the right time to unite, to think differently as one region with the same fate. The responsibility lying upon decision makers' shoulders is no longer a moral one vis-a-vis generations to come. It is very much an issue of the present harming our security. Placing the issue on the agenda of regional leaders, mapping risks, building an innovative regional plan action, and implementing in while maximizing cooperation projects of knowledge, finance, education, and performance may help us together to cope with the regional climate challenge. A special thanks to Arava Institute for having this panel and evidence for real cross-border leadership. As you know very well, nature knows no borders, and I add, climate change knows no borders. Let us all be leaders I hope we have many more such successful cooperation projects, and thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much, Mona. In this session, we will have 6 speakers from the Middle East region. We have speakers from Palestine, from Jordan, from Israel, from the United Kingdom. We had to change the panel a little bit. 2 of our speakers, Dr. Debbie Sandler and Dr. Tahani Abu Dakka, and actually Dr. Ridwan Abid from Morocco. They were not able to join us for unforeseen circumstances just a few moments before the COP. So I'll present the 2 slides of Debbie. And before that, actually, I want to add to what Mona said. Regional cooperation is not easy. It's a very hard task. But the presentations that you will see today from the Arava Institute and the Dead Sea Arava Science Center shows that it's possible. Regional cooperation is possible. Regional cooperation, even under a conflict, becomes much more important than the regular or normal circumstances. One of the projects that we have at the Arava Institute is the WaterGen, drinking water for the Gaza Strip. The Arava Institute managed to send into Gaza Strip 3 atmospheric water generators. It's a system that generates water from the atmosphere. Last year in May, more than 5,000 rockets were fired from Gaza to Israel. More than 1,500 strikes were conducted by Israel on Gaza. But during the 2 weeks, the Arava Institute was in a daily communication with our partners, asking them about this project. Are the systems safe? Are they functioning? The war ended on Friday evening. Saturday morning, we received photos from our Gazan partners showing people standing in line filling water from these systems. Gaza suffers from the lack of electricity, the lack of drinking water. Almost 97% of the aquifer in Gaza is polluted. 70% of the beaches in Gaza are polluted by sewage. And this is just one very simple project to show that even cooperation between an Israeli institution like the Arava Institute with the Gazans continues even during the conflict days. And yesterday, actually, we got the approval to send another 5 systems to Gaza Strip. The next slide, please. Another project that we conducted in Gaza is the neighborhood wastewater treatment and reuse. This is an off-grid wastewater treatment system. Most of the wastewater in Gaza is untreated because of the lack of electricity, so they either dump it into the fields or into the Mediterranean. And as Mona said, nature knows no borders. Pollution doesn't stay in Gaza. It filtrates into aquifer, impacts the joint aquifer between Israel and Gaza, and also it pollutes the eastern Mediterranean Sea. And we managed to send into Gaza an off-grid wastewater treatment system that runs on solar energy and batteries, runs 24/7. In a village called Abasan near Khan Yunis. It treats the wastewater for that neighborhood, and the recycled water or the treated wastewater is used by a group of women to grow animal feed, and that creates jobs and income for them. Okay, and now it's my honor to invite Dr. Jawad Hassan. He's a Palestinian water expert, and he will talk about one of the projects that he's conducting in the West Bank in cooperation with the Arava Institute. Dr. Jawad.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Tariq, for inviting me to speak on the behalf of what is Okay. The idea here is working under conflict and trying to find solutions. We started with a project 4 years ago, or plus minus, when the cooperation and the peace process almost was not there. Conflict with the Joint Water Committee between Israelis and Palestinians, they didn't communicate to each other, but everybody talks about trust in cooperation and trying to build something all together. And the reality, if we want to find solutions and to solve problems on ground, we need, first of all, to be equitable, equal, and fair with each other in terms of partners, in terms of working together, and in terms of the environment. What is the thing that we are looking at? Climate change is affecting the water resources in the region, in the Middle East, in the country, and we try to find solutions for such problems. One of these problems is wastewater and treatment of wastewater. In Palestine, wastewater is treated, but unfortunately it's not used. It's dumped into the wadis, where it infiltrates into the groundwater, polluting groundwater resources for the Palestinians and for the Israelis. And that causes a serious problem in the region. Around 120 million cubic meters of wastewater, which is not treated in Palestine. Part of it is treated, around 10% of it treated, but it's not used. So the Arava Institute decided to find a solution and to move one step forward to show that cooperation, regional cooperation, cross-border cooperation is possible if we prove facts on ground and avoid discussions within closed rooms. So our work based on, next step please. So our work based on the fact there is a pollution affecting communities, affecting the Palestinian community and affecting the Israeli community living in the region. In this map you can see this is a wastewater treatment plant. It's treated, infiltrates into wadis, mixed with untreated wastewater, infiltrates into the ground, polluting several wells. Mitzpe Jericho 1, Mitzpe Jericho 2, 5, and affecting and polluting the ecosystem. Two main springs, Prat, Farah and Fawar springs, they are polluted. A few years ago, the pollution took place for 1 month, 2 months during the winter season. Today, it's almost all over the year pollution is happening. So we show these facts to the Palestinians and we show these facts to the Israelis, and we try to build a trust between the two parties to understand that there is a problem that both of them they should deal with the issue. Our role was to mediate and to bring these two parties on one place, on one table, to discuss the problem. And this started bilaterally, without bringing the Israelis and Palestinians at the beginning together, but our mechanism was to build the trust among the Palestinians that they need this, and they need to solve this problem. It's part of their problem, and for the Israelis, it's the responsibility, and they have to take this responsibility over. So each of them, they ask for something. So our role as the Arava Institute, based on trying to match these requests. And we find out that the request from the Palestinian side with the Israeli side, it matches around 95%. So the conflict is over 5% only. So we show them that if we cooperate together, we could solve this problem. 25 years ago, the Palestinian Water Authority submitted a request to deviate the water from the treatment plant to downstream where is their use. In the upper part of the picture, you can see the first arrow. It shows the treated water flowing into the wadi, and the second one shows the mixing of wastewater to the treated water infiltrates into the ground and polluting the groundwater. The Palestinians are losing a treated, sustainable resource, and the Israelis are losing a groundwater resource. So what we did, actually, we worked closely with two parties, and we managed to close the gap over the 25 years to get a permit to build a pipeline. A few months ago, 2 months to 3 months ago, we managed to receive from the Israeli Civil Administration an agreement for the Palestinians to construct a pipeline to bring the treated water from the treatment plant to the lower Jordan Valley where the farmers can use and reuse the treated water in the agricultural sector. Thank you.
Okay, and now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Suleiman Halasse. Suleiman is the co-director of the Jordan Israel Center for Community Environment and Research at the Arava Institute, and he's also the head of an organization, a Jordanian organization called iGreen, and he's also a fellow at Oxford University. Suleiman.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. So today I will be talking about the activities that the Jordan Israel Center for Community Environment and Research is doing. The center is actually the youngest center among the Arava Institute group of centers, research centers that are operating. It's the first one actually that's being managed by or co-directed by two of the alumni of the Arava Institute. So it's a very nice way to see a continuation. What are the options for continuation of the learning process that we had at the Arava Institute, and how we can actually implement or apply the knowledge and experience that we gained during our studies over there. So the center mainly works with communities in Jordan and Israel in Wadi Araba or the Arava. We understand that the area where we work has lots of development needs. It's underdeveloped in both sides of the Wadi. And what we try to do is to help the communities to fulfill their needs, their development needs, in a way that doesn't or has the minimum impact on the environment. We work with different type of parties, with individuals, with research centers, universities, embassies, and we help the Arava Institute in identifying and working with the Jordanian side for the Track 2 diplomacy program that they have there. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So the work area is mainly communities among the valley, the Arava Valley, Wadi Araba. These communities are similar but different from, if we talk about the Jordanian side, the communities there are identified as the pockets of poverty in Jordan. They are the worst living conditions in the country. And if we look into the Israeli side, these communities are the peripheries. They don't get as much service as actually in the center of the country. So it is, in that point of view, they are very similar, but still, like, for a Jordanian living at the Jordanian side of the valley, when they wake up every morning and they see the other side, how green it is, how developed, that brings lots of questions for them. It's like, why we don't have similar conditions over here? One of the main things that people learned in working with us is like actually most of that was initiated by the people themselves. And it takes that much of will and commitment at the personal level in order to at least achieve something over there. We use different methodologies with communities, so mainly based on identifying what these communities have, what are their assets, and how to achieve sustainable development based on the assets that they have in their community. We also try to work on problem-based learning or project-based learning. So each community or each group of people bring up an idea of a problem that they want to solve, and that's part of the experience that we provide to them. One good example of what we are working on is a network for ecotourism, sustainable ecotourism practitioners between Jordan and Israel. So we provided to the different, first of all, we identified who are the communities interested or working in ecotourism in the region. We provided certain level of training for them after identifying where they stand, what their concept or understanding of ecotourism is. We identified the gap, and then we tried to fill that gap by providing certain training for them. We brought experts from different parts of the world. And part of that, an existing network is already in place for these practitioners on both sides of the valley. That first of all, it brings development for them. It's a business. That's how they make their living, and with hopefully with the minimum impact on the environment in their own environment, in order to have more sustainable development for them. That's what we do. I'm very happy to answer any questions afterwards during the question and answer. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Okay, and our next speaker is Dr. Oded Kinan. Oded is the education coordinator at the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center.
Hi. First, I want to thank Tarek and the Arava Institute for giving me the opportunity to take part in this really important panel. For the past decade, I live in an agricultural village called Ein Tamar on the southern shores of the Dead Sea, bordering with Jordan. When you ask a farmer from the village what is the nearest settlement to him, he will probably say Dimona, Arad, two small cities located over 50 kilometers from our village. I am sure that none of the more than 100 owners of agricultural estates in the settlement will say Feifa or Safi, although they are 10 or maybe less kilometers from the village. These towns are across the border with the Kingdom of Jordan, and for the local farmers in Israel, they just do not exist. I am sure that even if the farmer in the town of Feifa will be asked, he will barely be aware of the Israeli settlement near him. However, both Israeli and Jordanian influence each other and are influenced by each other to a great extent. Both also affect the same environment and are equally affected by the same environmental challenges, including, of course, climate change. So, how do we create a partnership between neighboring settlements which are exposed to the same environmental challenges but are on both sides of a political border that hardly allows cooperation? Well, we turn to education. In 2019 and 2020, we built a joint program for a group of Israeli teachers from the Arava and teachers from the Rura Safi area in Jordan. The program, supported by the Ministry of Regional Cooperation, the Regional Cooperation Unit of the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center, and iGreen Association, succeeded in creating real change and promoting an environmental dialogue between teachers on both sides of the border. Sorry? Yeah, that's good, thanks. In the first phase, a group of teachers and educators from the Arava region in Israel visited the Jordanian side and met with the Jordanian teaching staff. We toured the area, met local stakeholders and residents, and visited innovative and unique agricultural farms. We tried to learn together how environmental challenges and climate change affect the daily lives of the residents of the area. After 2 days of meeting and learning, we began to build a joint educational program based on the needs of the residents in the entire area. Next slide, please. In the second stage, the Jordanian teachers arrived in Israel for a joint training process. Together with researchers from the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center, the Davidson Institute for Education, and the Vice President of Weizmann Institute, we developed teaching methodologies and set up joint experiments in environmental and science education. At the end of the process, each team returned to its area and established an outdoor space in the school. Over several months, the students and teachers set up experiments and conducted scientific environmental studies in their own schools. The plan was to create a joint meeting for teachers and students from Israel and Jordan to collect the information from the experiments and conduct common thinking on possible solutions to the environmental challenges in the area. The meeting was scheduled for 14 to 16 of March 2020, and 50 students and 20 teachers were supposed to participate. A day before the meeting, Israel announced the first quarantine of the coronavirus. Despite the closures and the corona, and you can see the Zoom meeting over there on the left, we continued the relationship with Jordanian partners. We held Zoom meetings between the teaching staff and students. We even managed to qualify for the finals of the Israel Sustainable Development Goals competition when we proposed the creation of a farm to grow unique desert plants in Jordan. So what made the program so successful? For the first time, a friendly and equal relationship was created between a group of teachers from Israel and Jordan. A deep and joint learning process was conducted, and common needs were met. The program was built out of common understanding that both parties live next to each other and that we are all in this story together. So although the coronavirus has played havoc with the cards, we hope that soon we will be able to raise the necessary resources and continue from where we left off. I want to take the opportunity to thank my friends and colleagues, Farid Mahamid from Israel and Huda El-Shatawi from Jordan, who made this cooperation possible, and thank Rina Kedem from the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center and Suleiman Halasseh from iGreen for their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oded. It's really just a few examples, actually very encouraging examples on why we do this this work, the importance of bringing local communities, young people together. Okay, and it's now a really honor to invite Professor Richard Kaplan. He's also a partner with the Arava Institute in the Track 2 Environmental Initiative. Professor Kaplan is a professor of international relations at Oxford University. His research interests are in international organizations and conflict management. Professor?
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here and an honor to be associated with the Arava Institute. In the same spirit of the activities that have just been described, for the past several years, Oxford University has been leading a program in partnership with Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians, the purpose of which is to explore the prospects for and the benefits of regional cooperation with regard to management of transboundary water and energy resources. So again, very much in the spirit of what the other activities you've heard have been doing, but on a macro scale. So we've been looking at on a much larger level, taking into consideration, for instance, all electricity use and needs for each of the three jurisdictions, and similarly for water. So we've been doing a couple of things, and that's reflected in this slide on the screen. The first has been modeling and forecasting, and if I can have the next slide for a moment. This is a depiction of the work that we've been doing with respect to energy, electricity in particular. And what you see here is a representation of a simulation model or an infrastructure planning model that allows us to take into consideration relevant input factors, including the costs and the availability of various sources of energy, gas, solar, wind, batteries, diesel, coal, shale, all of these things. We're trying to be as comprehensive as possible, but also electricity demand, renewables targets for, again, each of the 3 jurisdictions, and emissions targets for each of the 3 jurisdictions, among other factors. And what we then do is to explore different scenarios and what those scenarios would yield. With regard to the scenarios reflect different degrees of cooperation. So from non-cooperation, for instance, Israel as an energy island completely, all the way to greater degrees. I mean, there's we have in mind the Blue-Green Deal is one example of regional cooperation over energy and water, but that is not the end. It really could be just the beginning of other similar activities. And as I said, we went into this completely open-minded. We didn't go into this with dogmatically with conclusions drawn. We were prepared to for any outcomes, but what we have found, broadly speaking, is that the benefits from increased regional cooperation over management of energy and water are great with respect both to economic savings costs, but also environmental benefits, the resilience, meeting of emissions targets, of renewables targets at a more affordable price. So there's a lot, in other words, to recommend regional cooperation. And if I can go back to the previous slide for just a moment, as I said, we've been doing this in partnership with Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians, and that has been a very important component of the work that we're doing for a couple of reasons. One is because we have what I think is fair to say probably some of the most robust data now available for the entire region, which was not been the case prior to the work that we were doing. And we've been able to gather that data in large part because of the cooperation that we've had from our partners on the ground. And also, it's been a process of building trust, of consultation with our parties. We're not coming from Oxford and dictating how things should be done, but what we're doing is really testing the waters, if you will, with our partners and proposing approaches that are likely to have resonance in the region because they really reflect the ideas, the thinking of partners in the region. And that's been, if you will, the track 2 side of things. There's also a kind of track 1.5 side where we're working also with former senior officials, former diplomats, former ministers, people who are in a position to open doors for us in order to have dialogue with current elected and appointed officials, because ultimately the idea is not just to put out some new and interesting ideas for regional cooperation, but also to change the narrative in the region. A narrative which, for instance, with regard to national security has been very narrowly defined all these years, and now increasingly, because of growing awareness of the threats and the seriousness of the threats of environmental challenges, now has increasingly environmental dimension to it. So a recognition that security also has to take the environment into consideration. And as I said, we're working towards adoption of new narratives, but then ultimately the adoption of new regional cooperative approaches among Israel, Jordan, Palestine, but there's no reason why we can't also consider broader expansion. Egypt, there's good reason to take into consideration, and of course now Gulf states as well, especially recognizing that their greater openness to engagement with Israel. So it's been a real, as I said, pleasure and honor to be working with the Arava Institute, also Damour, among the Palestinians, and also with Suleiman's organization and others in Jordan. So a true partnership, and we're looking forward to taking our work forward, hoping that it'll be well received in the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, and our last panelist, Dr. Clive Lipchen. Clive Lipchen is a researcher at the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, and he is also directing the Center for Transboundary Water Management. Clive.
Thank you very much, Tariq, and thank you to all of the speakers on this panel. So what I'm going to talk about is some of the cross-border work that we're doing, focusing mostly at the community. Why is it? Oh. Am I doing it or are you doing it? I'm doing it? Okay. So what I'm going to be speaking on is some of the work that we're doing at a community level. Jawad mentioned already one of the biggest challenges we're facing between Israel and Palestine in the environmental sector is the issue of wastewater, and the fact that we have lots of areas within the West Bank where wastewater is not being treated and this wastewater stream is then flowing from the West Bank, which is topographically upstream from Israel. As soon as that wastewater crosses the border, it is creating problems on the Israeli side. So we at the Arava Institute are trying to see how we can help to remediate this issue, both from the perspective of dealing with large-scale projects, as was mentioned by Jawad, but also on how we can also address this issue more at a community level as well. So that's what I want to talk to you about in the few minutes that I have. So if we're looking at the lack of sanitation services in the region, and here I'm not just talking about what's happening in the West Bank, but you can see roughly 70% of the Palestinian population in the West Bank are off the grid. And when we mean off the grid, they are not being serviced by wastewater infrastructure. That means that they do not have sewer grids in which to discharge their sewage. And without sewer grids, of course, no sewage can be sent to treatment facilities. This is not just a reality in the West Bank. You can see roughly 30% of the population in Jordan also faces this challenge. Suleiman could give you more information. But also in Israel, where we do a lot of work with the Bedouin community in the Negev, here too they are facing some of these issues. So we at the Institute are working with all of these communities to try to find the best approaches to resolving this issue. And because, again, it's a cross-border issue, this is also very much part of the track to environmental diplomacy that we are carrying out at the Institute. I just touch it and it moves. You're doing it. I'm putting it over there. Okay, so what you can see here, you know, whether you want to believe what I say or not, pictures, of course, really tell the true story. So this is a picture that I took a few years ago at the height of the summer. This is in the West Bank, in an area, in Area C of the West Bank, not very far from the Green Line that separates the West Bank from Israel. And here you can see raw, untreated sewage flowing in the environment. This is sewage that's flowing in one of the most problematic areas in the southern West Bank, which is the Hebron stream, the Hebron watershed, which drains all of the city of Hebron, collecting sewage from the city and surrounding communities, and channeling all that sewage eventually crossing into the Green Line. So what you can see here are a number of real concerns. Firstly, you can see due to the color of the water, the very high sediment load, and that is partly because one of the primary sources of pollution entering the system is the stone cutting slurry coming from marble factories, stone cutting factories. The Hebron area has a huge industrial area for stone cutting, and all of that slurry is not being treated, and eventually it finds its way into the environment. What you can also see is that this is not just an environmental issue. A big part of our work is to also understand the impacts on people and primarily the public health issue. You can see here a Bedouin is grazing his sheep in this area, and a question is, to what degree is the exposure to the sewage going from animals to people a concern in terms of public health? as well. For example, water quality studies have shown in the stream that heavy metals are also present, and of course that is a clear public health risk. The Hebron stream is just one example of these sewage flows crossing borders, and you can see here in this map, we're talking about roughly 8 catchment areas of an area of roughly 2,000 square kilometers, draining sewage, either not treated or partially treated from the territory of the West Bank into Israel, and you can see there the main catchment areas being highlighted. So this is one of the most, again, from our perspective at the Institute, one of the most pressing transboundary issues between Israelis and Palestinians. This is an important slide, firstly, because it's one of the first comprehensive studies that were conducted to try to assess what really is happening with respect to wastewater in the territories. This is a study conducted by the Civil Administration of Israel a couple of years ago. And what is interesting in this study is you can see the marked difference in terms of treatment of sewage in the settlements, the Israeli population living in the West Bank, which is in Area C, and the Palestinian population living in Area A. And what I want to highlight here is what you see in red. You can see that on the Palestinian side, close to 80% of the sewage is not being treated, and a relatively large proportion of that sewage is eventually finding its way into the environment and crossing the border. And on the settlement side, you can see a very different reality. Only about 12% of the sewage from settlements is not being adequately treated. On the Palestinian side, you can see that if we are talking about any kind of treatment, it's really just the capture of sewage into cesspits. Now, cesspits are a problem in and of themselves. These are not septic tanks. In other words, they're not lined. Basically, sewage is just discharged directly into unlined pits in the ground. They're covered with some kind of sometimes a cement slab, sometimes a piece of metal. And in actual fact, the sewage is encouraged to infiltrate into the groundwaters to prevent overflow. So one of the big problems here facing both Israelis and Palestinians is the long-term viability of the aquifer. So one of our most important sources of drinking water for both Palestinians and Israelis is the mountain aquifer system. Most of the recharge of that aquifer is in the West Bank, and literally hundreds of thousands of cesspits are draining sewage into that aquifer. So the long-term viability of this source of fresh water is directly impacted by the cesspits. So what are we doing at the Arava Institute with our Palestinian partners? Tariq says I have 1 minute, so I'll take 2. Thanks, Tariq. So one of the examples of the work that we're doing with our Palestinian partners is how to address this issue at source, on site. How can we find alternatives to cesspits? At the same time, another way of thinking about this, we don't just want to solve the problem of the sewage, but we also want to see how we can take that sewage, treat it, and put it back into production for farming, for food security. Because agriculture on the Palestinian side is very different from agriculture on the Israeli side. Agriculture on the Palestinian side is very family-oriented, very small scale. And a big challenge farmers face on the Palestinian side is water for irrigation. Wastewater, once it's treated, can be reused in irrigation. We know how to do that in Israel. How can we do it on the Palestinian side? So this is an example of a project we're doing with Palestinian partners in one of the most important areas for agricultural production for the Palestinians, which is the Jordan Valley. And we are introducing small-scale household grey water treatment systems that take the grey water coming out of the communities, divert them from cesspits into water that can be reused, effluent that can be reused for agriculture. I'm finishing soon. Next one. This is where you see the intersection between water and food. That's another one of our gravel filtration household systems connected to a small 100 square meter greenhouse. And we are irrigating tomatoes with that treated grey water. So again, there's a connection here between water, food, and income generation for local Palestinian farmers. Next. This is the reality of cesspits. And this, I just want to point out, this is a picture not from the West Bank. This is in the Bedouin community in Israel, in the Negev. where too the Bedouin are facing similar problems. You can see there, of course, that is a very dangerous thing. Nearly every year there's an article in the press of a child or somebody who will fall into a cesspit. It's a real hazard. The picture on the right is raw wastewater being used for irrigation. So we're also looking at how we can resolve this issue in the Bedouin community. And that brings me to this technology, which I won't get into details because I have no time, but we're also developing not just on-site systems to treat grey water, but also on-site technologies that can treat black water as well, again, for the same purpose of giving the communities an alternative to cesspits, and also providing these communities an active, reliable, sustainable, long-term source of water for irrigation. Thank you.
Okay, we have, I think, 10 minutes for questions, and I would like to invite our panelists to come to the stage, please. Okay, I'll leave my questions till the end. Are there any questions, Williams? Yes. Okay, can you please just mention your name?
Hi, my name is Avinoam. I have a question regarding issue of food systems. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. So I said my name is Avinoam. My question is in regard to food system perspective, because we talked about, like, in the presentation, there is a mentioning of also agricultural use of recycled water, and I wonder about, like, potential of regional cooperation in terms of, like, issues of food security, in terms of production of food, and what is the meaning of that, because this is also the co-op. This co-op is very focused on, like, the issues of food and resilience, and especially facing climate change. So we'll be happy if you can, like, elaborate on those issues.
Okay, thank you, Avinoam. Would like to answer?
Thank you for your question, and for controversial reasons in Israel and Palestine, it's completely, even though we are a tiny country in terms of size, but most of the treated water in Israel is used in agriculture, either to produce, most of it for animal feed, but partially for other things. In Palestine, still there's let's say, an ethical issue and religious issue related to this part, which is not clear yet what to do and how to do it. And there's a bit of understanding about the rights, water rights, what I have in hand as a freshwater resource and why I have to use the treated water resource. Now the Palestinian Water Authority, due to the activities that we carried on, they have an understanding that using other non-conventional water resources might lead for an enhancement in the community needs. What does that mean? This means they're going to use the treated water from the treatment plants for animal feed, to use it to grow the animal feed, because we import huge amounts of animal feed to feed the animals, and that imposes a huge cost on the product itself, affecting the poor families that they cannot purchase the products out of it. So using the treated water to enhance or to irrigate with for the animal feed enhances the effect on the food security and increase the share of fresh water to be delivered for the communities to use it for drinking purposes.
Thank you, Jawad. Any other questions?
Hi. Thanks for the great presentations.
What's your name?
Ari. They made me a bit more optimistic. Not much, but a bit more. I'm just trying to figure out how much all those initiatives are really sustainable, while we see that other aspects of collaboration, corporations are actually declining on some level. It looks like on both sides there's a growing distrust on many different aspects. And one term in this panel includes the word conflict. And I haven't heard even one talks about how conflict and probably future conflicts may impact all those initiatives, and how much you think that you'll still be able to generate goodwill and resources from the various government for those efforts. Because all those, I guess, NGO-style projects are great, but eventually if you want to scale them up into more substantial impact, you need some kind of collaboration with state resources. So how much do you think this is something which is available?
Okay, I think we are so used to the conflict, we don't even mention it. Actually, everything we do is based on trust, and this is our methodology at the Arava Institute with our partners in the region. First of all, we build a trust with our partners. The agenda of Track 2 or the Arava Institute is the joint or the shared environment. In the past, we used to chase our Palestinian and Jordanian partners to do cooperation. Now they come to us with ideas. We have this challenge. Let's design a solution and implement it together. Regarding the sustainability of the projects, I have an answer, but I would like to hear from our panelists.
So I think it's a very good question, and I would say that it's an open question in the sense that there is real possibility for growing cooperation on a larger scale, and I alluded to this when I referred to the blue-green project that is still in its infancy, but it gives hope for the kind of cooperation that would be required throughout the region if there were going to be significant improvements. And I think that what that represents is the establishment of a relationship of mutual interdependence, and that's very, I think, risky for the parties concerned. There's an acute sense of vulnerability, and I think that what has to be done in designing these kinds of programs is to ensure that there are alternatives available so that those vulnerabilities don't compromise, say, the security. And so, for instance, Israel, let's say if we take this project forward that I've just been describing with the solar generation of energy from Jordan, in exchange for which there would be the provision of desalinated water to Jordan from Israel, Israel would not be dependent on the solar generated electricity alone. It would still have available to it conventional sources that has been using to date. Obviously that would come at the cost of its commitment to renewables and reduction of emissions, but if the security, if reassuring, providing the necessary reassurance for Israel's security is one of the issues, and this is true also for Jordan for that matter, and I'm sure would be also if they were involved in this for the Palestinians, it can be achieved. So again, I go back to what I said from the outset, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think that there's a real possibility there, and when we, the Oxford team, went through the region as we did in June and July, and we met with actual officials, we found that there was tremendous reception to the ideas. They recognize, many of them, that there are very significant political challenges, but they also recognize the value and ultimately even the necessity of moving in the direction that we've been suggesting if countries in the region are going to meet their targets.
Thank you for the question. And also, I think in the panel here, we can show a very good example of how the two levels can work together. So, as Richard mentioned, the Oxford program mainly talks about the high-level, large-scale or country-to-country collaboration, while at the Jordan-Israel Center, for example, we try to focus on individual cases with local communities, small scale, that can actually be utilized and used as a proof or a showcase of how things can look like if we have that type of collaboration. And together with Track 2 diplomacy, which is mainly identifying these opportunities of collaboration that can show the benefit of actually how living together peacefully can yield, it's like a win-win for everyone, then that's a good example that can be utilized in order to advance things.
Thank you, Suleiman. Any other questions?
Thank you so much for this amazing panel. My name is Jacob. I'm actually a graduate student in the U.S. and I took a course last semester on transboundary water in the Middle East. So my question is about cybersecurity. So I'm just really interested in thinking about, as we transition to some of these new technologies and different countries in the Middle East work together, how do you think about using cybersecurity and making sure that these systems are secure? Thank you.
Okay, cybersecurity and wastewater.
So we're all experts in cybersecurity, of course. That was a bit of a out of left field question, but anyway, thank you for that. No, it's an important question because I think it also talks more about data. And one thing that's super important with a lot of the work that we're doing on wastewater treatment, especially because the long-term goal is not just to treat but for reuse, is water quality and water quality monitoring. Because, for example, when we work at these local community levels, that's a challenge. How do I know and how do I ensure that the water is safe for irrigation of not just animal crops, but crops that people are going to eat? So data collection, data monitoring, data dissemination, all of that I think is super important. And actually I think that there's an exciting place now where there is a growing intersection between the hardware, like the stuff that we do, treating the water, and the software, which is getting that data and how to actually make sense of it. And I think there's an interesting element where that can even help promote even more the collaboration. For example, one of the challenges that is currently being faced is that Israelis and Palestinians are using different methodologies to monitor water. So, we have two different data sets, and the question is, how do you find a way to reconcile those data sets? Because the Palestinians say, well, the water quality is this, or the flow rate is that, and the Israelis will say something different. So who's right, who's wrong? It's not really a matter of right or wrong, it's a matter of, you've got to build regional databases. So it comes also a little bit somewhat back to what Tarek is saying, it's about trust. You have to figure out how do we develop regional methodologies that both sides will agree to follow, and that the data that comes out of those protocols is trustworthy. So I think cyber security, the advances in AI, all of that stuff I think can have huge advantages to helping to develop those kinds of agreed on data sharing, because without data, there's very little that we can actually do concretely. So yeah, I mean, it's not exactly answering your question, I know that, but I think there is an interesting aspect to that. We at the Institute are developing an online portal that is pulling data from in-field sensors, bringing that online, and then, if we can disseminate that to everybody, it'll break down those barriers because everybody gets access to the data. And we don't, hold the data in any one person's, it's not proprietary, it can be free to everybody. And that can be very empowering as well.
Thank you, Clive. It's 2 o'clock now, and I don't have even time to close this panel. I want you to go directly to the second panel by Tel Aviv University on climate risks and finance sectors. And it's my pleasure to invite Galit to start the second panel. Please join me thanking the panelists, and again, thank you very much for the Ministry of Regional Cooperation for inviting us.
I'm originally from Florida. That's another thing I was thinking about. Like,
So should I start? It's working. Wow. It's okay or? Okay, hi. So, good afternoon. My name is Galit Kenigsberg from the Israeli Eco Arena, partners of Tel Aviv University Climate Initiative. And we are very glad to be here in the Israeli Pavilion. We see this session as a part of our journey to build a regional Mediterranean network on finance and climate change. The Mediterranean region is very exposed to climate change, and unfortunately, reality is changing more quickly than our yearly COP meetings. We do need ongoing dialogue, sharing private sector needs and interests that could sometimes keep the political conflict between countries, as we heard before the question about it. Analyzing the financial implications from a regional perspective can help us to develop the right risk scenarios for the region and to build relevant financial carbon management tools that will enable us together to finance the transition and to ensure regional stability and resilience that our region must ensure. There are a lot of net zero initiatives out there, I'm sure you heard about them, with very aspirational goals, which we support, of course. However, we do believe that in parallel, we should have more focus on the way to achieve these goals by developing the right tools for the financial sector and to deal with climate change together. We cannot expect the credit managers and the investment managers to become climate experts on their own. And this is something that is the focus of our activity. Since the Mediterranean countries share similar climate change challenges, we believe that financial institutions could strongly benefit from sharing information, knowledge, and solutions. In this case, the difference between countries in our region could be to our advantage, enabling us to share resource and knowledge to create a Mediterranean financial leadership network. We share the climate, we share the risk, and we could manage it better together. And I really want to emphasize the role of the private sector in this battle against the climate. We will hear today about the shared financial regional risk, about the opportunity, and will introduce the infrastructure that could use us to proceed. So our first speaker, I invite Professor Colin Price, head of the Climate Initiative of Tel Aviv University. So, thank you.
Thank you, Galit. So, first of all, I'd like to say that we've established a new center at Tel Aviv University. It's called Planet Zero. But the focus, instead of doing research, basic research at a university, is actually to look for solutions in all different areas. And in the last year, we've been mapping out where we can actually have an impact. And one of them is actually in the financial sector. And as we know, we can even go to the next one, that my field of research is actually in atmospheric physics, mainly related to natural disasters and natural hazards. Some cable came out. But we know that climate change has a huge impact on the financial sector, and but it's also an opportunity to get the financial sector to be part of the solution. So if we can get back to the slides. That's all the updates now. Yeah, let's watch a movie. Netflix. Okay, great. So if we look at the region, and also talking about regional cooperation, the natural hazards don't really stop at a border. They go throughout the Mediterranean, throughout the globe. And if we look at here on this plot, the number of large natural disasters which have occurred from the time we really have good data with satellites to monitor over the oceans, in the polar regions, it's gone from about 200 events. And these are events which are big enough that we need to get help from the United Nations. Individual countries can't take care of them. So from 1980, where we had about 200 of these large natural disasters every year, it's gone up to more than 800 in the present. So a factor of 400% increase in the number of these events. And in our region, we're talking about mainly floods from extreme weather, but also droughts, wildfires, etc. But more importantly is the costs of these events, and that's why we're here today, the financial aspects. And what we can see here, first of all, going by decade, the 1980s, 1990s, 2000, 2010s, the dots show you the number of events which cost more than $1 billion in damage, and the bars show you the total costs in billions of dollars globally for these weather-related events. So this is only related to the weather. And you can see that there were maybe, in the 1980s, if we had 29 of these events, we're up to 119 of them in the last decade. But the costs, we're heading up to $1 trillion in the damages. And if you look just in our last decade, the dark green part of that bar was just in the last few years, the damages. So the costs are shooting up, the damages from natural disasters. So that's the impact on the financial sector. And the next slide is we think that if we can convince them about the impacts, they can be part of the solution. And what we see here is the total damages, the costs in the yellow bars. But in the blue bars are the insured costs. Those are the things which are insured, houses, bridges from different cities. And you can see they're also going up dramatically. And so we don't have a lot of time here, but so I'd just like to focus on the insurance industry. And I think the insurance industry are going to be impacted, extreme impact. And we have a student at Tel Aviv University who just finished a thesis that showed that if nothing is done, if we go business as usual into the future, at least we were looking at the insurance industry in the United States and how hurricanes are going to increase the damages, the insurance industry is going to go bankrupt by about 2070 if nothing's done. And so by showing these kind of evidence to the financial sector, especially the insurance industry that looks 10, 20, 30 years ahead, we hope that we can bring them in to be part of the solution. They've got the capital, they can invest in new technologies, whether it's renewable energies, carbon sequestration, and therefore part of our role in this climate center is try to first to educate the financial sector that there's a problem, and a big problem for them, and then to bring them in to be part of the solution. So basically, I don't want to go through all the details here, but basically we've seen similar plots in many places. The hazards are basically the floods, the heat waves, the fires, which are going to impact us. the exposure of the public. It depends on our coastal regions, our cities, and also the vulnerability there. And what we're trying to do is to reduce the size of these circles so we can reduce the risk in the middle. If we can deal with each one of these with its early warning systems, financial incentives, and also bringing in the financial sector, the idea is we're not going to get rid of the risk, but just to reduce it to a minimum. Thank you. Another one?
Thanks, Colin. So we had a need for a financial regional network, and I invite now attorney Idit Reiter, partner of Goldfer Seligman Law Firm and the head of the environmental law and sustainability practice, our partner in the financial eco arena.
So we'll see if it works. Okay. So thank you. I'm happy to be here. And we will see why we closer. Okay. It's good now? Okay. So we will see why we call for this initiative for regional cooperation in financial institutions. So in the recent days, I think that many of you heard previous sessions on why this region is so vulnerable to climate change. It's a hotspot, it's water stressed, unfortunately a lot of conflict risks, and least developed countries. Okay. Okay. So why we need for a regional financial alliance on climate change? We need it because we know that cooperation is a strength. We need it because we know that similar geographic and climatic characters are common, and we have a common exposure to physical risk. We know that only a regional sustainable development can be effective in protect us in the region from climate risk. We also know that if financial institutions come together to finance together large-scale regional green projects, it will reduce for each of them the risk of financing large-scale projects. So all of these reasons will accelerate mitigation and adaptation processes and bring the financial institution to be a major participant in this event. So what is the framework for this regional cooperation? We all know the UNFI, which based the basic introduction between I'm sorry, I heard from outside. The basic introduction between financial institutions and actually environmental matters. And then we saw the PCFA and the GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And in 2021, we saw the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is an industry-oriented alliance of banks that operate under the GFANZ. Under all these institutions, we can find really strong data and documentation like the PRB, Principle for Responsible Banking, that is updated every few years. We can see the guidelines for climate target setting of banks, the strategic frameworks for Paris Alliance, and more. This is a very good basic foundation for data. But before I'll say the reasons for regional cooperation, let's take a look in two examples. for regional cooperation. One of them is the African Financial Alliance on Climate Change. It was established in 2018 in Africa. The guiding principles are commit to urgent climate action, manage climate action and risk, develop tools to monitor climate action, integrate climate action in strategic decision, and disclose climate action and risk. The members are multilateral development banks, central bank, and more, and we can see its operations starting and getting strength. We can see another example from Alliance for Green Commercial Bank in Asia. It was established recently in 2020, and the goals are growing financial institution green portfolio, designing new products and services for green projects, lining up with international best practices in managing environmental and social and performance in lending and investment, and so on. The founders and co-owners are the IFC, banks like HSBC, Bank of China, Citibanks, and all. And these are two great examples for regional cooperation of financial institutions. So what are the goals for regional sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't move up the slides. So what are the goals for the MENA Financial Alliance on Climate Change? The goals are to join green financing in cross-border projects. I think it's the main goal. The other goal is cooperation in technological development, like information and knowledge management. We heard a lot about it in a previous session. We all been introduced to the European regulation, the taxonomy, and in Israel, in fact, just recently, the MOEP published a draft of an Israeli taxonomy, and all banks in the region will have to develop a shared methodology and compliance with this object, and it's something that it's very important to do it in cooperation. We also can share data of physical risk, and we heard it this morning with the session of the MOEP and the state-of-the-art tools that they are developing, and the knowledge sharing and joint R&D of methodology for climate risk management. So finally, I think that the best or ambitious goal is to for a joint statement of green financing target as part of the aggregate credit portfolio. And I think for it's not me that said that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So we call for a regional cooperation. Thank you.
Thanks, CD. So we can see that it's doable. We can have a regional network, financial network. And I'd like to invite Dr. Shula Golden from Tel Aviv University Climate Initiative to moderate the second half of this panel.
Let's bring this even lower. So thank you, Galit. So after those presentations talking about the need for more regional collaboration and the idea and some examples from abroad, I'm glad to now present two short talks that will have about existing regional and international collaboration on financial aspects of climate change. None of us are working in a vacuum, and we're very glad to be able to share and cooperate with some complementary initiatives who are working to advance these connections, where the emphasis is really on the interface between scientific research, finance, and the climate crisis. So our first speaker is actually a recorded address from Professor Phoebe Koundouri. She's a world-renowned environmental economist and a global leader in sustainable development. She was at COP all of last week, taking part in a lot of talks, and unfortunately couldn't be with us here physically today, but she was very keen to contribute to this dialogue, and so we're glad to share her recorded address. I'll just introduce briefly before we start the video that Professor Koundouri is from the School of Economics at the Athens University of Economics and Business. To mention, she has a very rich biography, including the fact that she's a member of the nominating committee for the Nobel Prize in Economics, a trustee of the World Academy of Arts and Science, and president of the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. And as she'll speak about in the video, she's also chair of the Global Climate Hub of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a network that we, the Climate Initiative at Tel Aviv University, are also members of, the SDSN, and co-chair of SDSN Europe and SDSN Greece. And this whole network is driven by the mission to serve as a science-driven interface with policymaking. So in her talk, which we'll hear now, Phoebe will address the interface between the SDGs, ESG and climate change, and the importance of integrating all of these goals into the activity of the private and financial sectors as a means of supporting and financing transitions to a more sustainable economy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends around the globe. I am extremely happy to be connected to the Israeli pavilion and talk within the framework of the Tel Aviv Climate Crisis Initiative. My name is Phoebe Koundouri. I was at the COP during the first week with many speaking engagements in various pavilions, and today I'm happy to be with you to present the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Global Climate Hub. The Sustainable Development Solutions Network is a global network around the world with 1,750 member research institutions and universities. The president of the network is Professor Jeff Sachs of Columbia University, and I have the honor to lead the European headquarters of the initiative and also the Global Climate Hub of the initiative. Let me focus on the Global Climate Hub. Our mission is to provide science-based advice to governments for compacting the aggravated climate crisis and prevent further deterioration. We will use all extensive data, knowledge, and technologies provided by experts in various fields to develop country-specific action plans to be adopted and reinforced by the society. The hub will engage the UN SDSN country hubs across the globe, and through them it will engage all stakeholders that are relevant for the transition to a climate neutral and climate resilient world. The politicians of a country, the policymakers, the financial institutions, the businesses, the NGOs, the scientists and technology developers, and of course, the civil society. And our work comes into 6 transformations that aim to operationalize the 17 SDGs. The 17 SDGs and the 169 targets within them, measured explicitly in a quantifiable way through almost 300 KPIs, are our blueprint for the transition to climate neutrality and climate resilience. And I refer to all the SDGs and not just SDG 13, because we should know that all the SDGs are interrelated in a systemic, integrated framework, and we should all be thinking in that integrated framework when identifying and downscaling solution pathways for the transition to climate neutrality. The transformations that we are looking at are 6: education, health and demography, energy decarbonization, sustainable production of food, use of land, water and oceans, sustainable cities and communities, and the digital revolution for sustainable development. Our hub has 9 different units, 1 on climate data platforms and digital applications, 1 on atmospheric physics and climatology, 1 on climate and energy modeling, 1 on climate and land use modeling, climate and health, innovation acceleration for climate neutrality and resilience, just transition policies, finance and labor market effects, transformative participatory approaches within the creation of national living labs and systems innovation approaches for co-designing the pathways to climate neutrality and resilience, and finally, education, training, and upskilling and reskilling. With regards to the financial aspects of the transformation, who will finance the optimal mixture of investments? Who will finance the transformation that is needed in the public sector and in the private sector? The unit that is focused on that is, of course, the Just Transition Policies, Finance and Labor Market Unit. My team, which is composed of 4 different research institutions and 4 accelerators, is already in a position to announce that we have created a 3-step approach that allows businesses to identify the opportunities for sustainability transition in their value chain, and then measure the benefits this transformation, the sustainability transformation, can bring to the companies, and measure this not just in terms of ESGs, but also combining SDGs. Why is this important? Because ESGs are about the environment, society, and of course governance. But for a company whose main mission is profit making, you cannot identify a transformation plan that does not integrate profits. And the SDG framework integrates profits. So please stay tuned with us. Let's work together in order to share with you this tool that allows ESG and SDG transformation for businesses and companies, both in the public sector and in the private sector, in order to facilitate, but also accelerate the transformation to a sustainable business plan that not only respects the social aspects and the environmental footprint of a company, but also respects the need for identifying profitable opportunities in this big array of cost-efficient technologies, renewable circular economy, nature-based solutions, climate adaptation projects, and digitalization. And once you leave the business sector, either private or public, and you move to the greater plan of each and every country to move to sustainability, again there, we need to make the developer aware of how the SDGs can help identify the most efficient, economically and financially, as well as environmentally and socially efficient projects, and the optimal mixture of investments for these projects, if in Europe within the framework of the EU taxonomy, if outside Europe within a similar framework. And for the Global South, what we need is a firm commitment from multilateral banks and from the developed world to help finance the transition, to help create the fiscal space, the technology and knowledge transfer, and also finance the big investment in reskilling and upskilling the labor force in the Global South in order to make them really engage in the sustainability transition. This can be done. It needs political will, but it's crucial because without the Global South, no sustainability transition and no true handling of the climate crisis and biodiversity collapse crisis can be achieved. I close here by saying that this Global Climate Hub provides services to any of the governments that are interested. We have budgets and very big projects that are supporting each and every unit of the hub. And we are very interested in co-designing with you a downscale, detailed transition pathway that is readily implementable and showcases the technological and social innovations that need to be implemented in the country, the policies and policy transformation that need to be implemented in the country, and of course, the financing of this implementation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the Israeli Pavilion. Thank you.
So I think Phoebe's presentation really highlights the challenges, but also the need of bringing together everything, bringing together the finance sector and the policy and political will, as she mentioned, and sets the challenge for us. I'm very glad now to introduce our last speaker, who will focus us more on the challenges in the Mediterranean and Middle East region, which is what we would like to focus on with this network going forward. So I'm very glad to introduce Natalie Hilmy from the Scientific Center in Monaco, who will speak about the economic impacts of climate change in the Mediterranean region and the connection between scientific assessment and sustainable development policy. Natalie is an expert in macroeconomics and international finance, a section head of the environmental economics at the Monaco Scientific Center. She's in charge of the organization of the workshop series, Bridging the Gap Between Ocean Acidification Impacts and Economic Valuation. She's a lead author for the IPCC Special Report on the Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate, and also on Working Group 2 of the IPCC 6 assessment reports. We're really honored to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your kind invitation to talk here today. And it's nice to meet you because I missed you in Monaco, and it's a good opportunity to catch up now. We know that global warming has impact on ecosystems, and those ecosystems render services to the humanity. And so if climate change impacts the ecosystems, this will have an impact on our everyday life or our well-being, and also we can consider that those ecosystem services can be natural capital. This slide is from the IPCC report from the Working Group 1, and you can see that global warming is already at 1.5 degrees Celsius, so we are not on the right track for the moment. We have to do something. Otherwise, we have already extreme heat, heavy rainfall, drought, fire weather, and the ocean is already warming, acidifying, and losing oxygen. When we had those scenarios in IPCC, we can see that only the low and the very low CO2 emissions can help us to achieve the Paris Agreement. All the others are not good. So we have to act very, very quickly. And you can see here what is happening at 1.5 degrees Celsius, at 2 degrees Celsius, and at 4 degrees Celsius, because now we are going to the 4 degrees Celsius world. And here you can see that our biodiversity is impacted at different warming levels. It is very visual, so maybe we can do something. This is about the ecosystem services that are divided into 4 categories: supporting, regulating, provisioning, and cultural. Our livelihood depends on nature as well. Nature's crucial services are at risk in the warming world, and this is from the Working Group 2 6th Assessment Report of IPCC. There are pollinations, coastal protection, tourism, recreational, food source, health, water filtration, this is by seagrass, and clean air, but also climate regulation. I took an example from coral reefs because the Scientific Center of Monaco is focused on coral reefs, and you can see all the ecosystem services that coral reefs provide. The main are fisheries, tourism, and coastal protection, but also health and the biotechnology coming from the ocean, from the corals. This slide is from IPBES, and you can see that we can give a value to the different ecosystem services. We know exactly how to value those ecosystem services, because sometimes we hear that we don't know the methodology. This is not right. We have many ways to evaluate, and this is to show you that there is no shortage of methods, and we just need to take those methodologies and the results of those evaluations to the policymakers and to show them that ecosystems have really a great value. What we need is a transformative change to address the global biodiversity crisis. It relies on shifting away from values that overemphasize short-term and individual material gains to nurturing sustainability-aligned values across society. This slide is from IPCC report, and the message is clear. 1/3 of the solution can come from nature against climate change, and it can come from the land, the forest, or the soil, but also from the ocean. In conclusion, in order to conserve natural capital against climate change, prevention is possible by helping nature to resist these environmental changes, maintaining a genetic diversity and restore certain ecosystems, helping communities to adapt, and raising awareness. This is from the MEDEC. I don't have the time to enter into the details, just to show you that there is already a network of collaboration between the different Mediterranean countries. I'm also part of the MEDEC because this network has been created because until the 6th assessment report of IPCC, we didn't have a focus on the Mediterranean. We had regional studies, but not yeah, maybe. Oh. Sorry. So we had already studies on regional aspect, but not really a focus on the Mediterranean. The 6th assessment report has a cross-chapter paper, the fourth one. I'm also a lead author inside, and we had this focus on the Mediterranean finally in IPCC. The MEDEC, in the MEDEC we produced the first Mediterranean assessment report on specifically the Mediterranean, and this is how we developed this network. In the Monaco Scientific Center, we have many projects focused on the Mediterranean. In my section, we work on fisheries because we know that, and it is a multidisciplinary project, we know that fishes are going northward, so the south and the east of the Mediterranean that are already more vulnerable to climate change will lose the revenues and the food security from the fisheries because those fishes will move northward. Another project is also to study the pollution impact and the cost that it will have. We have some other projects focused really on the Mediterranean, and I will be happy to work with all of you. Thank you.
Summarize here, as we're really at the end of the time for the session, but basically just to say that over the past year in the Tel Aviv Climate Initiative, we've been working with partners from academia, from the private sector, and also regulators to try and see how we can advance tools together to deal with the economic and financial aspects of climate change. And we're really calling now and hoping to develop more regional partnerships on these topics. And we've spoken here about some of the challenges and also the need of regional collaboration, some existing models that can indicate how we can do that. I think to tie into some of the earlier presentations we had in the session, really the challenge here is about the processes, about understanding the processes that enable us to work together across sectors and also across countries and different populations. And so we're open to any individuals and organizations who want to join us in that mission. And like I said, we're out of time. If there are any comments, we're happy to hear them in this forum or to speak afterwards. And thank you all for your attention.